Institutions, says Ivan Illich, create certainty, and taken seriously, deaden the walk us through what it means to disagree, what disagreement is, and how we might disagree well. I'm Father Billy Daniel. I'm the priest here in St. Michael's Church, and we're so grateful that you've come out for this wonderful conversation, dialogue, forum, so that we might be advocates of good disagreement in our community. Kyle David Bennett is I like to call him a public philosopher. He has taught most recently philosophy at Caldwell University in New Jersey, and before having his post there, and he's written a good deal about how to disagree well in various formats, perhaps most extensively in his book, Practices of Love, which I commend to you. But I don't want to delay his engagement with us, and so I'm going to turn things over to Kyle as he walks us through our topic of disagreement. Thank you all for being here. And I do want to note tonight's event is co-sponsored with the Political Science Department at SUNY Geneseo and St. Timothy Lutheran Church just down the road. And so we are grateful for our sponsors and for all of you being here with us. All yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. You can hear me okay? Welcome. Thank you for being here. I will try not to keep you too long. Our disagreements might extend, but I'll try not to keep you too long that you miss the first football game of the season. I know you're all eager to get home at 8:20 and watch that, but we have some disagreeing to do. Lose the pride. Ask why. Choose better. Tonight we will talk about disagreement, but more importantly, perhaps, we need to talk about the basic things that we do that inhibit disagreement, that already set the board up, if you will, in a problematic way and make it difficult for us to disagree with others. Now, we're in church, and I don't know if you've been in church before, but it's often the case that you sing, chant, or recite something. So I would like for you to recite with me, lose the pride. Ask why. Choose better. Let's do it like we mean it. Lose the pride. Ask why. Choose better. One of my favorite poets, contemporary poets, lyricists, and hip-hop artists is a gentleman by the name of J. Cole. J. Cole has this song called Pride is the Devil. And the chorus, or the bridge, goes like this. And it's on your handout. I hope everyone had a handout. If not, they're over here on the side. It goes like this. Pride is the devil. Think got a hold on me. Pride is the devil. It left so many R.I.P. Terrified paranoid. I put you over everything to fill the void. And when you're gone, will I have anything? Or will I be destroyed? Now, the part that's fascinating to me is that second part. Terrified, paranoid, I put you over everything to fill the void, and when you're gone, will I have anything, or will I be destroyed? You see, one of the basic things that we forget as we approach disagreements, we're aware of as we approach someone or in the moment of, ooh, they don't believe what I believe, immediately something goes on, something stirs. Now, more often than not, it's an emotion that goes that way and not that way. That is to say, it's an emotion that is drawing back in some sort of fear like, oh, you don't believe what I believe. This is a problem. Now, what happens after that emotion, after that terror or paranoia, is something else kicks in. What do I do about that? What do I do about the fact that you don't believe what I believe? You used a term that I lambast on a daily basis, that I don't mention at all, he who shall not be named or something. You immediately either kick in or continue back. Now, I would like to suggest to you that more often than not, when you realize that, it's pride that kicks in. Now, the thing about pride that we may not understand is it comes in sort of two movements. The one I've already mentioned, I'll hold off on that just a second, but we're all aware of the other one. That's just stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand. You don't have all the facts. I do. You don't know what's going on. Oh, of course you do. You come from such and such. Right? This assertion of ourselves as superior. Now keep in mind that emotional disruption. But the other side of pride that's really interesting, that I'm encountering, that I look all around me and see, is that pride, instead of asserting itself in a form of arrogance, I'm smarter than you, I'm better. There's a form of pride that turns around and says, you're not worth it. Have you experienced that before? Now, I'm not going to ask you if you've done it before, but we see it, don't we? It comes in the form of evasion, avoidance. They don't know. They're from that place. They're of a younger generation. They're not of this religion. This is an interesting form of pride. And it might be more destructive. We can argue about that, we could disagree. It might be more destructive than the assertion form. Because the assertion form actually cares about the other person. The backwards form, the flight form, says you're not worth it. Or this is not going to go anywhere, and I'm not going to invest in it. Now the thing about disagreement, we could talk about this later on. I see four elements, four organs to disagreement. It involves listening and listening carefully. It involves stating or speaking clearly so that people know what you're saying and they can understand you. It involves understanding cautiously. Now, what I hear you saying is that what you're trying to say? And it involves judging constructively. To disagree is to find that place where you and I diverge. Now, dis in Latin, in all declensions of Latin, Dis is an inseparable prefix, which means you can't take it out of the word, which is interesting to think about agreement. Why is dis attached to agreement? Might that mean that we all disagree about something on some level? So even though I think I'm agreeing with you, there might be some point or some way that you would go with that conclusion or that idea or that theory that would cause me to say, no, I would never go there. I disagree. But to disagree, that dis means you know where you separate from someone. And in order to know where you separate from someone, you need to know where they are. Pride is unwilling to take us where we need to go in disagreement in order to understand others. Pride doesn't want to understand the other. The pride that kicks in throws itself on the other. Or the pride says, you're better than that, and takes us away from the other. Does this make sense? These three basic things that we often forget, after each one, I would like for us to turn to our partner for 3 to 5 minutes and answer the question on our handout here. Do you have fears? When's the last time you had a fear in an argument? What is your emotional response? How do you get when you realize, oh, this person doesn't believe what I believe? Now, I don't want deep psychological analysis. Just what triggers? What happens? What disruptions occur? And which way do you often go? Do you often go with, you don't know what you're talking about, or do you go with? So, for a few minutes, turn to your partner, discuss this, and we'll reconvene and carry on. Sheets over there. There's this one. That's not on your.
Okay. Oh, I must not know.
It's fine. All right, I hate to interrupt good conversations. I hear no yelling or shouting or interrupting or name calling, so that's usually a good sign in today's society. Lose the pride. Now we are in church, so I will offer the opportunity of confession. Is there anyone who would like to share, very briefly, would like to share their experience in this regard? No one willing to admit that they're overcome with it? Yes, sir.
I'd say during, like, especially online, like Facebook debates, that's where it gets me a lot of times. There are times I'm like, no, you're just wrong.
Yes.
So it definitely, I get caught there.
We will talk about disagreeing on social media in a little bit. Yes.
So when it comes to like interpersonal relationships, my first response is always like, I'm so sorry, I can't believe that, I'm like I'm a horrible person. And then I like take a step back and I get angry. So that's my response.
Thank you both for sharing. Anyone else? They didn't come tonight? Are you thankful? Well, since we are talking about disagreement, and in particular public disagreement, and even more particular perhaps later, political disagreement, I would like to offer you, to read to you a fairy tale. Because that's what you do when you're trying to see the world differently. This fairy tale is from E. E. Cummings, also one of my favorite poets. E. E. Cummings wrote a fairy tale for his daughter. I'm going to read the last few pages of it. So the story goes, the fairy tale goes, that these people go to the fairy and they complain about this old man who constantly asks why. And they hate it, and they want to get rid of him. So they tell the fairy, get rid of him. The fairy looks up ways to figure out how to get rid of him, but the fairy cannot find anything. He flew all night, and he flew millions and millions and millions of miles, and at last, just toward morning, he saw the moon a way off, looking no bigger than a penny. But as he flew toward it, it got bigger and bigger and bigger until he could see it clearly. And finally, flying very hard, he came to the very edge of the moon, and then he saw a high rock right on the very edge of the moon, and on top of this rock there was a tall church. And on top of this church, there was this tall steeple. There was sitting a very, 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 very old man with little green eyes and a big white beard and delicate hands like a doll's hands. And this little old man never moved and sat all by himself, looking and looking and looking at nothing. The fairy stopped flying and alighted on the moon. He folded his wings and walked up to the high rock and called to the little man, but the little man paid no attention. That little man must be deaf, the fairy said to himself. And so he opened his wings again and flew up to the top of the rock and shouted, "Hello!" But the old man sitting on the steeple didn't move. "That's so, man," said the fairy. And so he opened his wings for the second time and flew up to the top of the church. And standing on the roof, he cried out as loudly as he ever could to the very old man on the steeple, "Come down!" But there was no answer, and the little old man with the green eyes and the doll's hands didn't stir. "Well," said the fairy in disgust. And so he opened his wings and flew quickly right up to the very top of the slender steeple and alighted on just beside the old man and bellowed with all of his might, "What are you doing out here?" And the little very, 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 very old man smiled. And he looked at the fairy and said, "Why?" "Because I've come all the way from the farthest star to see you," the fairy said. "Why?" said the very, 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 very little old man. "Just a moment and I'll tell you why," said the fairy. "I've heard a great many complaints about you." "Why?" said the very, 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 very old man. "Because I've got ears, I suppose," said the fairy angrily. Everybody in the air and everywhere and on all the stars is complaining about you and making a dreadful fuss. Why? Said the very little old man. Because you say why all the time, said the fairy. And it's driving everybody mad. People can't sleep and can't eat and can't think and can't fly because you're always saying why and why and why and why and why over and over and over and over and over again. And I've come from the farthest star to tell you that you've got to stop this whying. Why? Said the very, very, very old man. And the fairy grew pink with anger. If you don't stop saying why, you'll be sorry. Why? Said the very, very little old man. Now see here, the fairy said, that's the last time I'll forgive you. Listen to me. If you say why again, you'll fall from the moon all the way to earth. And the little, very old man smiled. And looking on the fairy, he said, why? And he fell millions and millions and millions of deep, cool, beautiful miles. And with every part of a mile, he became a little younger. First, he became a not very little old man. Next, a middle-aged man. And then a young man and a boy. And finally, a child. Until, just as he gently touched the earth, he was about to be born. I suspect that many of us have stopped asking why. I suspect that many of us no longer imagine a different world. Be that as it may, about the fairy tale is more often than not, we have explanations for things, and we have positions on things, and we know the right answer. But oftentimes we don't ask why. Now this, I think, is a really important strategy in coming to understand other people so that we either agree or disagree with them. But we can't get to agree or disagree with them without first understanding them, without first asking the question, why? Now, on the one hand, that manifests itself in, why do you believe that? More often than not, we assume so much about why they believe that. Of course you believe that. You're of this religion. You're of this place. You hang around with these people. You all share the exact same view. But on the other hand, we don't ask the deeper questions that really will help us understand someone. What are we here for? Now, I'm not asking us to go into deep metaphysical questions, philosophical questions. What are we here for? What is governance for? How should we interact with each other in society? Why should we wear masks? Why should we get vaccinated? Now, it's not a policy question. It's a deeper question of what are we doing here? What kind of relationship should I have towards you? Should I care about your health in the first place? See, I think when you start to get to those questions, you will see who you're dealing with. I don't know the circles you run in, but it seems to me I run in a lot of circles where people are just living for themselves. Here I am saying I should wear a mask to protect other people, and other people are wearing masks saying, I don't want to die from you. Now, wherever you come down in that position, that's an interesting question to get to. How should we interact? Why would you do that? What do you care about? That's getting to the level of understanding. Does this make sense? Let's take a moment in our small groups. Just turn to your neighbor. Another question for you. Do your disagreements ever get to the level of fundamentals? Why are we here? What should politics do for us? Should we even have conversations with each other? What benefit do arguments and conversations have for us? Why should I ever talk to anyone ever again? And do you see, I'll touch upon this when we come back, do you see how asking why is not only insightful for understanding others, but it's also liberating for you? So let's take 3, 4, 5 minutes, talk to your partner, we'll reconvene, and carry on. What's that? The surveys? You often feel what? Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Anyone else? Thank you for sharing. Yep.
Just piggyback on that, so you might come to a point where it'd be good to get into that, but you can't. Like you know you can't do it that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so then to keep avoiding.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Anyone else?
Makes me anxious.
What does?
Getting into those kind of
Yeah.
conversations makes me anxious because it's like opening up a part of your soul, and I'm not sure that I want to do that.
Yeah. 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 Yes.
I think bringing the conversation down to the fundamentals can be really hard. It's like bringing the other person with you because maybe they'll want to talk about the now right hand and feel like you're taking them down into a different avenue.
Yeah.
Really, you're trying to get to the core.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are great, fantastic responses. It's what I see is I know quite a few people who don't want to get to the fundamentals. They don't want to think about why we're here. They don't want to think about what politics are for. I mean, it's scary. I don't want to say it's sad in sort of a judgmental way. It's scary because it just sounds like herd mentality. That people are doing things just to do them because everyone else is doing them. And then when you raise questions and get them to pause, why am I doing this? They just keep doing it. Just because. That's terrifying. Opening up is terrifying. And you try to open up, and you do, and it's exhausting, and it's full of anxiety, and then the other person is superficial and doesn't want to open up. And that working, to get it to a place when it works, takes so much time, so much effort. Disagreeing is not easy. But, my friends, tangential comment, footnote, neither is agreement. We may affirm somebody else's view, but maybe we don't really agree with them because we haven't fully understand how they got from all the way back to the beginning to all the way there. No, I'm not going to go there. So yes, agreement and disagreement is difficult. It's exhausting, it's enervating. But what we're doing right here is a step in the right direction. We're having a conversation. We're naming the problems about having a conversation so that we can move closer to agreement and disagreement. Yes, sir.
I'm just going to say everybody likes to be in a comfort zone, and it's a security blanket, and if you ask the question why, it comes across as challenging that, and putting people out of their comfort zone. And I think that's not happening for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I would say, when anybody asks me why,
The whole obstacle I had to get over, I don't know. How many of you, don't raise your hands please, not confession. How many of you are scared to be in an argument or a disagreement or a deep conversation and say, I don't know. Or another one, did you read the No, I didn't because I have a life. I wasn't able to read it. What did it say? Summarize it for me, right?
That makes sense.
Did you get all that?
Yeah, totally. So, you need admin privileges?
No.
Yeah.
I already have
Yeah.
admin
Oh,
privileges.
okay.
I just need to
Great.
get on the internet, and
Okay, yeah.
I shouldn't need admin privileges. for the
Yeah,
internet.
got it.
I feel like you're not actually listening to me.
Yeah, sure.
Are you
Yeah,
actually
okay.
not listening to
Yeah,
me,
no,
or are
okay.
you saying that you
Okay,
get
sure.
that it seems
Yeah,
that
totally.
way?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, you need to stop
Sure.
that.
Okay, doing what?
You need to stop checking in with
Okay,
me so
right,
much, saying
okay.
yeah. You need to stop
Yeah.
saying yeah.
What do you mean?
It seems like you're not listening, and
got
that you're
it.
just focusing
Got
on
it.
saying
Yeah, no, that
got
makes
it, and
sense.
everything.
Yeah.
Like you took
Yeah,
some kind of
okay.
active listening class,
sure,
but
yeah,
you're not actually
totally,
paying attention.
Totally. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Then why did you disagree with me a million times while I said it?
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just showing you that I'm listening to you. So you with your dog is what I'm hearing?
No, you're clearly not listening.
Sure. Totally.
Okay. If you're actually listening to me, why don't you tell me what I just said?
Sure. You said that when you try to get online, it keeps asking you for an admin password, which doesn't make any sense because you don't need that to get online, and you should be listed as an admin on this computer anyway. You asked if I was listening. I verified that you had admin privileges. Then you spent the next 2 minutes scrutinizing the way that I listened to you and my concern for your pets. Then you asked me to recap the conversation, which is where we are right now.
So you're gonna fix my computer?
Sure.
Have you ever experienced that before? Does that resonate with you? Yeah? Pride often inhibits us from having a deep, good conversation, let alone a disagreement. Pride can also inhibit us from agreeing with someone because we assume we know where they are and how they got there. Asking why, or just asking why is not an inhibitor, it's the opposite. But sticking to these very, very ground level conversations and policies and arguments and the polarization therein without realizing similar things in history. What are we doing? Choosing poorly is a way that we inhibit disagreement and understanding. What do I mean by choosing? Well, for starters, we probably all disagree with anybody who says anything to us. Do you want to have a disagreement with everybody who says something to you? Sort of set ourselves up for failure by saying, I am going to prove to somebody else that I don't know anything about them and I may not. We're setting ourselves up for failure. We're not who have the patience to listen to us, who have the humility to say, I don't know. Or, God forbid, not really, or, I was wrong about that. I'm sorry. That's the kind of people I agree with. People who care about the truth, people who want to understand, people who are willing to say, I don't know, let's think about this. Or listen, yesterday I know I said to you I was absolutely right. After thinking about it, after reading such and such, talking to so and so, I may have been wrong and I'm sorry. That's the person you want to disagree with. Not a rant. The person matters who you disagree with. The place matters. Facebook is not a great spot to disagree with somebody. You're going to need a lot more time. You're going to need a lot more patience. You don't know what's going on the other side. How can you understand? The period of time, as we've already noted, you cannot have a disagreement in 15 minutes. You can't have a disagreement in an hour. Disagreement is an activity. It's not an act. It's a continual learning and understanding. Where are you coming from and why do you have those views? And as we all know, I hope, upon self-reflection, sometimes we change views. We are growing. We are changing. And so disagreement requires coming along with others as they grow and change to understand that. And procedure matters. I have to confess. We're in a church, so I'll confess. Let me explain. There is an important procedure to understanding. You have to listen first. Think about it. Ask questions. Think about it. Say something. Understanding doesn't happen that quickly. So what makes us think that we're agreeing or disagreeing with somebody when immediately we snap it? No, you're wrong. Or yeah, you're right. Interruption. Or, one of my personal favorites too, thinking about what you're going to say before they're done talking. Here we go again. I know how I'm going to debunk this. Are you really listening? Have you grasped where they're coming from? For our final breakout session, the discussions here again are on the bottom. Look under Choose Better. By prods of prudence, I mean the people that you disagree with, the place you disagree with, the period you disagree with, or the procedure. What fall victim to? Selecting the wrong people to disagree with? Trying to disagree with somebody 15 minutes during smoke break and then running back to work? Do you have a good say? No, wrong. What do you struggle with? What could you improve on? Let's turn to our neighbor for a few more moments and discuss that, and then we'll reconvene.
How I'm going to interact with people who are more enforcing of the vaccine mandate.
Okay.
My ability to discuss that.
Okay.
And I've spent a lot of time researching and thinking about it. And I compiled a list of all the arguments for the vaccine mandate, arguments against the vaccine mandate.
Okay.
And
did you want to disseminate these? Or do you want to put?
Yeah, and I wanted this to maybe be a discussion on that somewhat, because I feel like that's the primary political, social issue going on right now, especially in terms of this college community. It might not relate to people who aren't involved with it.
I'm not sure. All right, let's reconvene. Where are my brave souls? Where are my brave souls who would like to share?
I say my personal weakness definitely is with the purpose. A lot of times I want to be able to see eye with people. There are some people that I know are for just proving they're right regardless.
Yeah.
It's kind of difficult to pick out who I can effectively have a discrete discussion with.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
I think a big problem in terms of something that fuels mutual conflict that isn't necessary is a person's egotistical, egocentric assumption of already possessing perfect knowledge. And I think it's better for every individual whenever they're engaging in difficult conversation to have an assumption discussion with so many people is that they have an assumption that, like, I have A on one side, which is like, oh, pharmaceutical companies are evil and they're going to destroy the world, and anybody who says otherwise is like a puppet of their media propaganda. And then that's wrong because, we don't know whether or not that's true. And then on the other side, it's like, if you're not fully willing to get vaccinated immediately, then that means you're an anti-vax Trump supporter and then you don't care about anybody. And that's not necessarily. Is people just being willing to acknowledge that, like, all like, we do not know, any of us, like, really what's going to happen and what has really been going on, but it's important to be able to have that discussion in a peaceful and calm manner that values the truth of what's going on, as opposed to asserting your own pre-existing values in terms of your assumptions on
Yeah.
When we have conversations with friends, it's been back then.
Right.
There are no classes where you digest what that person thought and formulate your own response. So kind of a different view, leading than I have coming in.
And how do you feel about that?
I like it, but I'm just being
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
I really expected something else. How to get up so that I can talk down to somebody.
Yeah. I would propose that often what we consider as disagreement is not disagreement at all. I hope you've grasped that. To say no to somebody's conclusion is not to disagree with them. There's many points in their argument that you could diverge from, but still affirm their conclusion, but you still don't understand them. You don't know why they got there. You don't know why you go a different direction than they do, right? That takes time, that takes energy, and all these things that we've discussed. But the confrontational disagreement is often just non-agreement. I don't know why. I'm just saying no because I don't like it. That's not disagreement. Disagreement assumes understanding. And it assumes that you understand what you believe and how you got there. Why absolutely. Yeah. All right. No? Okay. I think Father Daniel has something to say, and then I would like to open it up for a wider Q&A and feedback time.
Yeah, so we have just a minute for some Q&A, but first I passed out just a quick little brief survey. If you would either do that while you're here, or if you're a little tech savvy, you can follow the QR code and fill out the form online. And we will of Kyle's books here, and we will randomly select one of Kyle's books. And Freddie, have Kyle. And having to. But yeah, we've got a little, maybe 5 or 10 minutes Q&A, more broadly. Yeah, go ahead, Jim. And let me get the mic to you, Jim, so everybody can hear your question.
Thank you. I'd like to respectfully disagree, perhaps,
Excellent.
and ask a why question. So your talk was very informative, and I got a lot out of it. The pride, the why, it was really helpful. But my question is, your cadence of speech, your presentation was very much like a sermon, and maybe that's not surprising, given where we are, and so forth. But a sermon, by definition, you don't argue, you don't disagree with. The sermon is something you accept. There's an authority, a very high authority, who's telling you. And I just wonder why you chose, in a discussion about disagreements and how to disagree, why you chose that presentation style, because it doesn't seem to fit well to me. But
Can I ask you what would fit?
yeah, well, I mean, you can't be boring. I mean, you can't be a college professor like me and be boring and just, yeah. And just lecture at people. But again, it just felt remarkable that the cadence of the voice, the chanting to begin with about pride and so forth, just really seemed to suppress disagreement. And I don't disagree really with anything you said, but yeah, and I don't have any good answers. I don't know. I'm dumb. So,
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So there's something, if I hear you correctly, there's something about the presentation of it that doesn't quite fit with what's with respect to disagreement. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious, a few thoughts are running through my head. I'd be really curious what a discussion of the concept of disagreement, what that would look like if it's not a lecture. Self-reflectively, my purpose in presenting that way is to make us aware. There's so much about disagreement that I didn't talk about here tonight that I've talked about yesterday that was far more presentational and lecturing and whatnot. If I have a project, it's to help people become aware of what disagreement is and how to do it better. Not necessarily tell them what to do, but to better equip them to become aware of what a disagreement is and how to navigate that. I think our concept, many of us, our concept of disagreement is something combative. It doesn't have to be. The guy with the sign on Instagram, one of them is like, we can disagree and still be friends. Absolutely. I'm passionate about fundamental core disagreements on principle levels. I'm here for this reason, not for me to live a happy life, but for me to help people. I'm willing to confess that to other people, and they say, I'm just here to have fun. Okay, we fundamentally disagree about why we're here, but we can still be friends, and we can still work together. And I also think, taking that a little further, I also think disagreement doesn't mean tolerate and compromise. I actually think when we really get to the bottom of things between each other, We just want to work with each other instead of run away or tolerate begrudgingly. That was the second thought. The third thought is, I disagree with sermons. I used to be a pastor. I used to ask people to critique my sermons. I think Father Daniel would be thrilled if we came up to him afterwards and said, that's not actually what it says in the Greek. So yeah, just some thoughts. But I'd be curious if something does come to mind about how to articulate or navigate a conversation about the concept of disagreement that either makes people aware or takes them further into that field. By all means, please help me.
So we got two questions down here that I'm really curious about, this idea that you don't disagree with sermons. so do spread that word. Do spread that word. I can't remember which of you had the question.
Actually, but I liked what you had to say. I think it's really interesting. But I also think that, like, for me personally, it seemed to come from a space of privilege, because sometimes we can't disagree. If I am a trans woman, I can't respectfully disagree with rights. And that takes out so much mental energy to fundamentally disagree about whether you have the right to live as a person or whether you have the right to marry somebody you love. And, you know, if I was in that situation, I would want people who don't have stakes in their life to be able to respectfully disagree about that. Okay. And that was the thing that I took away.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So, question of clarification. Is it an issue of disagreement in the sense of understanding what the other's experience is, or a disagreement about how I should vote on a policy that affects the other person? Which one would it be for you?
Both. Because if it's my human rights, I can't have somebody say to me, you know, you can do what you like, but I'm going to vote to have you live as a lesser to me. I can't respectfully disagree with that.
But the person, so can I understand you and your experiences, or is that an impossibility for me?
I think it's definitely possible, and you can even, I think that you guys could come to a conclusion, but I think it takes so much mental, emotional energy that it is almost not worth it if it's going to wreck your mental health for that week. If all you're going to be thinking about is how this person thinks this, that, and the other thing of me. Because, you know, if I was like, I'm a lesbian, and the other person says, lesbians are perverts. Or, you know, you're allowed to live how you live, but, you know, I think it's really hot. Like, you know, I'm going to be thinking about that. And that weighs negatively on me, even if we do come to an understanding.
Yeah. I do think, I hear that, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. I do think that also comes with the territory of the person. I think there's two dynamics going on in what you've set there. The first is the person that you're disagreeing with, right? Hopefully you pick somebody who cares about you, who comes to know you and your experiences, and you can have conversations about political policies and law. That's also a different dimension there too. One of the things that I discussed yesterday was, it seems like a trend in society now is we hardly disagree with each other, but I'll just go try to influence law to make you the way I want you to be. Instead of having hard and difficult conversations about what your experience is like, and that informing my understanding of how to vote. Right? So one of the options on culture that shoos away disagreement is for me to say, I don't need to disagree with you. I'm just going to vote in this way, and you'll eventually become what I want you to be. Obviously, that's not understanding. Obviously, that's not listening. So I hear you. I also think those two dimensions or dynamics are equally important. having conversations with people who you disagree with, who understand you and care about you and want to be in that long road of discussion and disagreement versus the stranger, you know, with a sign or a bullhorn. We can disagree about a political policy, but I could also vote differently than what I think. I think there is a dynamic there, and I think more and more people are realizing or are forced to do that I really think this ought to be the case, but I've got so many people in my life that I know this would wound and devastate their lives. I'm not going to vote for it.
We got a question here, and then Joe's question in the back, and we may have to stop it there. Go ahead.
All right. It's okay if I just quickly address someone else in the audience. I say to the person who's behind me, by chance after this forum, can I grab your contact information? I would love to have a discussion on your, on the vaccine thing. I believe, sir, just...
I have papers over there too.
Fantastic. Okay, I might have to contact you. That's okay. I say, but more question now for you. For the part you're talking about, the person like dissenting from the majority, and like that, would you possibly compare that to like a social like prisoner's dilemma in which like one party is having a difficulty making themselves vulnerable for fear that the other party won't do the same for the beneficial result? And if so, could we possibly solve it the same way?
You might need to connect that a little better for me. Help me. Could you rephrase it?
Sure. Like, so if we're talking about that one person who was questioning the majority kind of thing. If that one person outwardly says they're disagreeing, they're making themselves vulnerable to the majority. Mm-hmm. If the other party doesn't, they get nothing out of it except possible ostracization.
Sure.
If both make it, they can can open up and discuss. They can get better understanding. That seems sort of similar to like the prisoner's dilemma to me at least, as if one does an action and the other doesn't, one can just walk away happier. One loses a lot, but if they both are to do the action, they can both gain more. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It was similar?
I'm not sure that this will answer your question, but and you could push back or ask further questions. I do think, tying it back to disagreement, I do think that once we do stuff like this and more of stuff like this, wherever we are, we will realize that we are not unanimous. There are so many different layers of agreeing and disagreeing, and we will come to see more and more diversity of opinions. Two of my favorite political thinkers, Hannah Arendt and Simone Weil, both of them talk about totalitarian thinking. Thinking of Nietzsche talking about a herd mentality. We are often so swept up in the final conclusion of a view where we ought to be. It's either pro or against, or con, It's either one or the other, and yet I think intuitively we grasp that there's got to be a ton of other positions in between. So I welcome those who have the courage and the humility and the patience to say, now wait a second. I have that view, like I think we all should wear masks. Okay, great, don't stop there. How do you get there? Are you trying to protect yourself or protect others? Do you think it should be mandated? Do you think it should be commanded? Do you think it should be enacted in law? Like, once you get down to those sorts of things and that way of reasoning, I think we'll come to realize, like, that one dissenter isn't alone. When we start to understand that process of our thinking, and we say, oh, whoa, I didn't know you believed. I mean, it's happened to us, right? We have a conversation with somebody, we've known them for a long time, and then they say something offhand, and we're like, what? It's not because they changed their view or their conclusion. It's just we never saw them thinking through the process. We never saw them connect the points, or they never gave that to us, or we never asked, right? So, I mean, I would like to think that in some way, shape, or form, we'd all realize we're all dissenters. And what that does to the majority, I don't think is anything scary. I think, A, we're understanding each other a lot deeper, and B, we're getting a lot more options of what could be possible. I think this is what Simone Weil, when she talked about totalitarian thinking, it's like we are raised in schools to either pick a side. You're either this or you're that. And she said, that is devastating to thinking. Don't pick a side. Think for yourself. And that doesn't mean that you'll go way off and go off the deep end, as they say. You probably won't. But we're trained not to think for ourselves or to think creatively. We're trained to pick a side. And so we never know what goes on in between picking a side. Am I making sense? Okay. I think we have one more.
Yeah, I think my question relates to a lot of the other questions that have been being asked, which is that we talked about the idea of disagreement is often combative, but it doesn't need to be. But does disagreement ever need to be combative? Should all disagreement be respectful? For example, I've talked with people who have views that are truly horrendous, for example, right? Things that are, someone mentioned, maybe not respecting other people's right to live, right? And how do we cope with that, or how do you think we can approach that in a way that is optimal?
Yeah, great question. Let me respond with this, and then I'd like for you to give me a little bit more of just that scenario. But disagreement is different than, say, rhetoric or logic or debate. When I debate someone, we come to a setting like this. There's somebody in the audience. I give my arguments and opinions, and you combat them. You give me better ones. Everyone sees it, and they say, he won. Right? Persuasion, rhetoric is, I'm trying to get you on my side, and I'm going to appeal to your emotions. Now, Jim might be onto something that I'm using quite a bit of rhetoric to persuade you to my side. Now, I would chime in and say it's innocent. I don't think I'm right. I just want to make you aware of something, but I'm going to appeal to your emotions so that you get invested a little bit and you're wondering what I'm doing. That's rhetoric. I already know I've got the right answer. I want you to come on my side. Logic, I'm looking for poor reasoning in the way that you're thinking about things. Disagreement is primarily about understanding. It's not about winning. It's not about winning. It's not about pulling somebody over to your side. It's about understanding. And there is something absolutely beautiful about that to me. I don't want to bring everybody to my side. I don't want to leave everybody where they are, because I do think that I'm right about some things. And I want to talk about those things. And if they're right, I want to come to their side. But disagreement is fundamentally about understanding, and that's it. And so, can it be combative? Sure. Should it be? No. Why would I get mad about understanding someone? Why should I get mad about understanding them? Now, if I move out of that place into, I'm going to persuade you to change your view on that, I'm in a different terrain. Or I'm going to vote and enact a law which forces you to change your position, which never works, right? But so disagreement is fundamentally about understanding, and I don't think understanding ever should be combative. Does that, I don't know if that...
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Thank you.
Yep. I think we're out of time. We can stay after. I can chat with you if you like. I think we're out of time now. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciated your comments, and I wish you fruitful and productive disagreements in the years to come. If you completed the survey and you would like
Put
to
them on
keep it-
that back table on your way out, or hand them to me or Kyle. Yeah, thank you so much. Kyle, thanks so much for... And I do hope that you will leave here having actual disagreements and better disagreements. And I would be remiss, you're inside the church, and I am a priest, without letting you know that on Sundays at 9:30, we gather in this room for worship where no one disagrees with the homily. And I don't know what time worship is at St. Timothy. 9:30. At 9:30, where there's lots of disagreements, so, pick your church. But gather somewhere and have a good disagreement. Thank you again for coming out. And have a great, lovely evening. And thanks again, Kyle.